Hi everyone, my name is Brittany from Brittany Loves Reading, and recently a series of books that I read last year and absolutely adored announced that they are finally getting audiobooks. It has been something that I've been talking about for a while that I wish they would come out with audiobooks for this series because I would love to reread them with audio. Since early 2023, I have done the majority of my reading through audiobooks or immersion reading. I do physically read, but nowhere near as much as I do audiobooks, and I do a lot of immersion reading. It is my preferred way to read a book. But prior to that point, I actually didn't listen to audiobooks very much. I actually mostly physically read. So some of my favorite books of all time, I've never experienced in the way I prefer to read, which is immersion reading or with an audiobook. We all know how immersive an audiobook experience can be, and having this series announced that it's coming and knowing that I'm going to be rereading it with the audiobooks made me think, what other books do I love that I've read in the past that I've never done the audiobook for? So I looked through my list for 6 books that I have not yet reread with the audiobook that I think would really add to my experience of the book. So I'm going to chat about 6 books that I would like to reread and redo with an audiobook or an immersion reading experience. The first set of books I'm going to talk about are the ones that inspired this video. The Witsec Series by Ashley Rostek, I fell in love with last year. I got a Kindle, I started down my KU romance, dark romance, thriller romance path with this series. This is not necessarily a dark romance. I would more put it as a thriller romance blend, and it is a why choose. I do love a why choose book, so there was a lot of reasons why this worked for me once I started reading it, and I binged the first 3 books. I think I read them in like 7 days, and then I had to wait for the 4th book to come out, which I have now completed the series. They have announced that these books will be coming out over the fall, so I think we're getting one in October, one in November, one in December, and one in January or February. Sometime in the new year, the last one is coming out. And I cannot wait to listen to these books and fall in love with the Four Stone Brothers again with my ears. I talked about the series a lot on this channel, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I will give you a quick blurb of what this is. It follows Shiloh, and Shiloh is in the Witness Protection Program, hence the name of the series. Shiloh's family had something very tragic happen, and Shiloh is the only remaining member, and obviously she is hiding from the person who did that. We do follow that through the 4 books of her being in hiding and also what happened to her family. She moves in next to the 4 Stone brothers and starts to get to know the twins, who are the youngest 2 Stone brothers. They're about 18, and then the older 2 brothers as well, and it is a why choose. One of my favorite fantasy duologies of all time, the first book is my favorite, but I did enjoy the second as well, is Strange the Dreamer by Lonnie Taylor. I adored this book, and I have never reread it, first of all. Never, not yet. And I read this with my eyeballs because I did not do audiobook at the time. I would love to visit Laszlo Strange again and do it in a different way while immersion reading this book. I definitely want to immersion read this book and potentially annotate it. That's definitely possible because that is also something new that I am newly into. Laszlo is a librarian and is researching the lost or mythical city of Weep at the time of him kind of doing the research. They don't even really know if Weep is real. No one has ever seen it. No one has ever gone across the desert. However, during the first book, people from Weep show up where Laszlo is, and they are looking to get some help with a situation that they have in their city and is looking to take a delegation of people to Weep to help them. Laszlo is just a lowly orphaned librarian and certainly not on the list to go, but does step forward into the crowd and kind of says, I know so much about your city. I even know your language. Take me. And really advocates for himself to go, and does go. And so much happens to Laszlo through these books. The prose in this book is so beautiful. Lonnie Taylor's writing is so gorgeous, and I would love to experience that again with an audiobook. This next book I actually read last year, so I was reading audiobooks at the time that I read this book. However, I had the arc of this book, and I did not realize when I picked it up as an arc that it was a podcast book. So I have yet to hear the book in its entirety with the podcast elements. I have heard the podcast bits that were on Apple Podcast, and this is for the book None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. They released the podcast going up towards the release of this book on Apple Podcasts as like an actual podcast, and I did listen to those. But I have not listened to the book in its entirety as an audiobook. It was on my best books of the year. I had a great time with it. It's my favorite Lisa Jewell book. Honestly, podcast thrillers are just best through an audiobook component if they are done correctly. And I need to re-experience this book. In this book, we follow Alex and Josie, and they meet each other and find out they are birthday twins. They have the same birthday. And Josie approaches Alex, because Alex does podcasts, and says, "Why don't you do a podcast with me about me changing my life? I'm about to change my life, and I think you would find that interesting for your podcast." Alex says yes, and quickly realizes that Josie's life has had a lot of horrible things happen to Josie, but also that maybe Josie isn't quite telling Alex the entire story. We follow a very twisty, turny minute. There's a lot of triggers in this book, so please check. It is twisty, it's dark, it's twisty. And through the whole book, you just have no idea who you can trust and who is telling you the truth, hence the title. My favorite dark academia book of all time is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. It's my favorite dark academia book I have ever read. And I read it physically with my eyes. And I realized that I had never listened to the audiobook of this when everyone did the Can I Trust Britney videos back in my birthday in February. Everyone kept asking me if the audiobook was good, and I kept going, I don't know. I haven't listened to the audiobook. And how have I not listened to my favorite book's audiobook? We need to write this. Also, I think I'm going to annotate this one too. This follows 5 friends in a Shakespearean college where they are learning Shakespeare. They're learning acting skills. It is very Shakespearean. It's written like a Shakespearean play with acts and lines and scenes. One of them gets murdered. One of them goes to prison for it. But was it the person who actually did the murder? You have to read the book to find out. I love Leigh Bardugo's writing, but I fell in love with Leigh Bardugo with Ninth House and Hellbent. I have read one Leigh Bardugo prior to reading those books, and that was Shadow and Bone, and I did not love Shadow and Bone. However, I need to get back into this series so that I can get into Six of Crows, because everyone tells me I will love Six of Crows. And I think I will have an easier time falling into Shadow and Bone if I try it with the audiobooks. So even though I did not love this book, I love this author, and I need to do the series, and I think I will have a better experience rereading the first book with the audiobook and then continuing with the subsequent books. So I definitely wanted to put this on this list, mostly as a reminder to myself that I need to get on this. I need to read Leigh Bardugo's backlist and reread this one to do so. Because this one wasn't a favorite book for me, and I'm actually more rereading it to see if I can get into this world again, I actually remember very little about what happened in this first book. It's also been quite a while since I read it. So I definitely need to reread the first one to continue, and I think the audiobook will really help me with that. The last book on this list is, again, a book I read last year, so I was listening to audio at the time. But this was an ARC that I was given. I had the physical ARC, and I loved this book. Loved it. The magic system is what I really loved about it, but the dark academia vibes were on point, and I had a great time. And the second book is about to come out, so I kind of want to reread the first, but with audio this time, and really immerse myself in this magical school, in this magical world. And that is Curious Tides by Pascal Lassalle. This got on my radar for getting the ARC because it's blurbed as for those who like Ninth House. And we all know that's one of my favorite books. So I was very excited to dive into this, and it did not disappoint. In this school, all of the children are separated by their different types of magic, and the magic they have is based off the moon and how it affects the tides. And they're separated into their different houses by what phase of the moon they were born under. So you have your waning moons, your waxing moons, and you also have very rarely an eclipse. And the eclipse magic is definitely something that people consider to be dangerous. We follow Emery, and Emery is returning to school after something that tragic happened last year. Last year, she and a bunch of her friends went to these caves to kind of follow this myth, and a bunch of her friends drowned and were never found, including her best friend. We also follow the brother of that best friend, Baz, and Baz is eclipse born, and he has this eclipse magic, so we get to see that from Baz's perspective, and from Emery's being kind of friends with Baz. Emery is trying to find her footing back at school after what has happened when all of a sudden her friends start to return and dead bodies start washing up on the beach that have been missing for months. You have to check this book out. If you like dark academia, if you love a really unique magic system, this is for you. And I need to reread it with the audio before the second book comes out. But those are the 6 books that I want to reread now that I am in my audiobook immersion reading era. I just love how immersion reading brings so much to a book, and I want to re-experience those 6 books and some of the sequels that are attached to those books, because some of them are series, as an immersion reading or audiobook experience. If you made it this far in the video and have nothing to chat with me about down in the comments, leave an ear emoji for audiobooks. Also, if people haven't watched this video, it's really going to confuse them why there's a ton of ears in the comments, which I find kind of funny. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.